Well, greetings to you on this Memorial Day holiday, and thank you for taking the time to join me today. It's a special occasion for me, starting my teachings online and live on Facebook. So thank you again and welcome. I'm again very excited about what's ahead. You know, as I thought about today, I was kind of concerned that it would be a holiday that I had chosen. I wasn't even thinking that when the date came to mind and the time. But then as I pondered the notes that I have, I realized that it really was a very appropriate time for the information that I'll be sharing with you today. The information that I have put together for you is actually course material that I'm working on for a course on faith, and it's pretty much the outline that I'll be reading to you and sharing and teaching from today. I plan on having an ongoing series. Once a month I'll be coming to you talking about faith and other issues of practicality and spiritual life and how we get through some of the most difficult things that we often have to face. But as I was saying, I think this turns out to be a very appropriate time considering many of the events that are going on all around us and that are impacting us. And you know, a lot of it is truly unsettling and uncomfortable, scary, and makes us very restless. And we sometimes just don't know how to get through times like this sane. And I don't claim to have all of the answers to that, but I do know I've been through a lot of things in life. My list of trials and tragedies is, I feel, just way too long. But today I'm going to be talking to you about faith and moving forward and the things in between, the questions of faith and how you move forward when things do happen in your life. And again, I don't have all the answers, but I do believe that I've learned enough about principles that there are things that are going to inspire you and encourage you, strengthen you as you follow along with me today. I have several points in this outline that I'm going to go over and talk to you from. This series is called Let's Talk About Faith. So I'll be talking to you. I'm not able to respond on any of your comments or anything now, but I promise I will do that for you later. So there are a lot of important things to remember when we face issues in life and find ourselves in those situations where we just have collapsed, life has crashed. So one of the first things I want us to look at is the question of faith. What is faith? Well, you know, I wrote a book, What is Faith? Quotes and notes to encourage and inspire you. And the way that came about is because I felt that I was in a crisis of faith. I didn't quite get it in the sense of the things that I had been taught. I know that the Bible teaches us that faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. And I remember the first time I heard that, it didn't really mean much. You know, when we think of faith, we think of certain other things, the power to get things done. We think of the patience in waiting. We think of running the race or being still or letting go and letting God, all of those kinds of things. But it set me out on a journey to try to discover what does it really mean to have faith, and why was I doing so many good things in my life and not getting the good results that I wanted. Jesus said that, you know, if you have a faith the size of a little mustard seed, that nothing would be impossible. Well, nothing was working out, in my opinion, at least not the way I had hoped. I tried so many things over my lifetime to make it work or find myself standing strong or moving and navigating through life in ways that I thought I should be doing better, but it just didn't seem to work out quite the way I had hoped. So I asked a lot of questions. I remember particularly a few years ago, I was watching an episode of Blue Bloods. Maybe you're familiar with that. It's one of the more popular shows that's on television. And I really don't remember what happened in the episode at all. I just remember this particular thing that I'm going to share with you right now. At some point in the show, usually it's toward the end, Tom Selleck's family, he's the chief of police in New York in the series. They sit down for dinner, and as a family, and they usually talk over issues, some serious, some fun, and the whole gamut of that. But this particular evening, someone asked him, "What is faith?" And my ears perked up because I'm wondering, okay, this should be good. And he said, "Well, faith is complicated." And I tell you, when I heard that, I threw my hands up and I thought, whoever wrote that line for this show, kudos to them. Applause. They need an Emmy just for that one line, because truthfully, that's exactly true. That's exactly true. Faith is complicated. I want to share another little story that has brought a lot to life for me about faith. I went back to school at Houston Baptist University in my adult years to get my BA, and it was a journey. It was quite a journey. When I got toward the end, toward graduation, the whole journey was pretty interesting. It takes a lot of entrance exams to get into such a prestigious school, and it takes even more exit exams to be able to graduate, along with a lot of other things you have to comply with toward the end. Well, I calculated my credits and things really well, so when I got to the end, I only had a couple of courses that I needed to graduate. One of them happened to be that I needed a math class. Well, the only math class available was an advanced math course, a collegiate level advanced math course. Now, it was one of those that I didn't want to do. People had told me, you're going in the danger zone with that one. Well, if I didn't take that course, I wasn't going to graduate, period, until the next semester, when I could take something that would be a whole lot easier. Long story short, I took the course. It was not easy on any given day. It was a real challenge. It was one of those types of math courses where there could be 10, 20, 30, and even more steps to get to solving a problem. Well, I managed to get through it. None of us really loved the class. But on the last day, when we were going to have our final exam, and keep in mind now, I had to pass this course in order to graduate. When all of us walked in to take the exam, we sat down, she handed the exam to us, and literally, I looked around and several students had started to cry because they knew there was no way after, flipping through it, that they were going to make it through it. But I had a really wise teacher, and here's what she said to us. She said, take your time with each problem. Work through it as far as you can get. Solve the ones you can. Don't stay stuck on the ones that you can't. You'll just be wasting time. Try to get through the entire exam. I will give you credit for everything you tried to answer, even if you did not finish it or get it right. I'll give you some credit for effort. Well, I got to work, and I went as many steps as I could on each math problem. Several of them I was able to finish. Most of them I was able to finish. But there were those that had the 20 and 30, 40 steps that, you didn't know where you were going, but you kept at it. Well, when class time was over, when I finished the exam, and I walked up to her to hand her the exam, she said to me, "If you don't pass, will you walk?" Meaning, was I going to walk across the stage and get a sheet of paper tucked in a nice folder that wasn't a degree? And I shook my head, I smiled, I said, no, I won't be doing that. Well, at that point, I left the class, and she said the grades would be posted in a couple of days. Graduation was the following week. Interestingly, I just felt like I didn't want to go and take a look at the grades. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this with blind faith. I did the best that I could do. I did everything she told me to do. And I'm just trusting and believing with blind faith that I made the grade that I needed to make. Well, graduation day came. Now keep in mind, I never went to see if I was going to be graduating or not. But I got dressed. We had to get all the stuff and, all dressed up for it. And my family, a lot of my family had flown in. I didn't even tell them that I didn't know if I was really graduating from school or not. But it was just the most amazing thing. When they called my name, and I went behind the curtains and up the stairs, I still, wasn't sure. I was just believing, again, by blind faith, that I was going to be all right. And sure enough, as soon as I hit the corner and the professors all looked at me, they all started smiling and said, congratulations. So I did it. Now, I shared that particular story with you because there was so much that I learned about life from that experience. Mrs. Williams taught me a lot about moving through problems and doing the best you can and the most you can. It was a great life principle for me, listening to her from class to class and how she taught. She thought she was teaching math. She was teaching me a lot about life. And then just moving through the process of taking that exam and then going to the graduation and knowing that I was relying on what I knew was my faith and the fact that I had put my best foot forward, that I had to get the results that would be in my favor. And it just so happened that I did. So here's what I want you to know. I had no clue, but I had an expectation. And that's how faith very often works. When we think of the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, to me that's blind expectation. But it's still a very powerful principle that we can live by. You learn that you have to apply faith accordingly. It may take one step. It may take 23. It may take all your effort, or it may take very little effort. And sometimes you will see, like in that class, there will be sometimes things that you just can't solve on your own. And I dare to say to you that many of life's complications are just that. They're too complicated for our human understanding. And unfortunately, sometimes and many times, what happened wasn't what we wanted to have happen when we are faithing. And you find yourself in a position where you're questioning yourself, like I did so very often. And you question God like I did so very often. You question what went wrong. My motives were good. My efforts were right. And somehow still things just did not work out. Well, the thing I want you to learn about the question of faith is that we learn to stand on blind expectation. When we don't see it, when we haven't experienced a result, when the outcome or the answer isn't there, we have to learn to stand on that principle, because at some point, even though the answer may not have evidenced itself yet or the substance has not appeared, just like in those problems that I could not finish, it doesn't mean they didn't have an answer. They did. I just didn't know what it was. And I didn't. And that's how it is with us in life very often. We don't know what the answers are, very often, but we keep moving on the principle of blind expectation. And eventually, a lot of things do come clear to us, and also we often get the answers that we hope for and pray about. Now, if you're one of those people who you're thinking about faith, and you're praying for a Maserati and a 10-bedroom home and millions of dollars to be in your bank by tomorrow, well, you have to know that that kind of praying, if you can even call it that, is not going to be effective. Too many ideas about God is that he is some type of magician of sorts, and a lot of people lose hope and faith in God because of inappropriate asking or not understanding what it is that they're really needing, and that God and who God is. And he's not a magician. Certainly you can acquire a Maserati and a big house and lots of money. That's not what I'm saying. But if I ask for that, I'd be challenged to believe that by tomorrow morning all of that will have manifested itself to me. So we have to understand the principles as well when we're asking and we're praying and we're expecting things in faith. But on the other hand, there are things like, we get disappointed about a lot of things. Maybe you wanted this particular job and it didn't work out, or you were looking for a certain answer to a deal you were trying to make, and that didn't work out, but only to find that you got a better deal somewhere down the road, or there was a better job offer. And then you come to realize, well, it was just a good thing that particular thing fell through, or that particular deal didn't work out for me. So understand again, with the principles of faith, it is complicated. It can be confusing even. But if you trust what the scripture tells us, that it's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, meaning that that's a blind expectation on our part, we will always get some kind of answer. My second outline point is finding the courage to stand. We're talking about standing. Courage is so necessary in the faith process, especially in the most challenging of times when things are, again, crashing, collapsing, and going crazy. I've had severe losses in my life. Some of the most special people in my whole life I have lost already. I've had financial loss. I've had business loss. I've had times where I just lost everything, even more than once. And I kind of always jokingly say, but thankfully say, the one thing that I didn't lose is my mind. And I truly am grateful for that. But what do I mean when I talk about having courage? Well, I'm talking about strength. I'm talking about ability. I'm talking about fortitude, the wherewithal, the stamina, the focus, the persistence and patience and praying that helps us get through many of the hard circumstances in life. And that's what it will take. And I'm speaking to I know of people who we think about these shootings that just took place, and it's horrible. I think about the people in Ukraine, and they're just a couple of examples. There are so many issues that people are going through where their faith is being challenged, where they've lost the ability or even the desire to stand. And courage is truly the answer. It's what it will take for you or anyone else who has collapsed under the strain and stress of life. It's going to take, listen to this, courageous reactions to things that have happened, courageous ways in which we respond, what we do, and a lot of courageous reasoning. Back in 1976, I experienced something that is a mother's worst nightmare. I was at an event, and I learned that my 4-year-old daughter had been killed in a car accident. Well, I'm going to try to make the story as short as possible because I don't want you to miss the point. She was killed instantly because of the impact of the oncoming vehicle. There was no way she would have survived. When I got this news, as I said, I was out at an event. I collapsed to the floor. I had to be literally carried out because every bit of strength and energy and everything had left my body. I couldn't think. I felt people carrying me. It was a difficult time. When I got home, all I could do was lie in the middle of the floor, trying to wrap my head around this experience of what I was going through, telling myself it couldn't be real. And the pain and the trauma were so great. I could hear traffic. I could hear voices. I felt like I was in a time where I was just lying still. I lie there weeping and just trying to process things. Suddenly, out of where I don't know, the thought came to me that I wasn't the first person who ever lost a child. God lost his child. I didn't think of that until just now, but in our realm of natural understanding, many people have lost children and they have survived it. And that thought came to me enough to keep me breathing, to help me have a type of calm. And I said to myself, if they made it through it, I'll make it through it. And I was suffering so greatly at that point, but I was able to come up with a courageous reasoning and reaction and response. And I don't mean I got up like Superwoman and took off to take care of business. That did not happen. I just had enough inkling of the thought that somehow I'm going to get through this. Somehow I will find enough courage. Somehow I will find enough strength. Somehow. And I could only at that point, for a very long time, stand on the somehow. How? I didn't know how you get through such a great tragedy. I just knew somehow. And so I encourage you today, those of you who have had that experience, that you must stand on your somehow every day, every moment, every hour, every month, all the months and years that it will take you to get to a place where you feel that you are strong again and recovering. But it takes that kind of courage. And that story is still fresh for me. However, I found enough courage to stand on the somehow. And every day I still rest my faith in somehow knowing that the next day is coming and somehow I will still be standing. I want to share the next point with you. It's the third point that I want to make in the outline, is choosing the perspective that's right. Well, in the midst of that trauma, it was suggested to me that I go see a psychologist, not just for myself, but my other children were also in the vehicle. My dad happened to be driving the car that they had the accident in. And so I thought it was a good idea. And so we all went to visit with a psychologist. It's the first and the only time I've ever sought that kind of care. And I'll tell you why later. But he said something that was critical for rebounding from such trauma. And he said, you have to try to keep living out life as normal as you can. As normally as you would have done had this not happened. And I'm thinking, well, that's certainly easier said than done. And definitely, I tell you that it is. But it was great advice. It was exceptional advice. And I took heed to it. And I kept working. I kept moving about my day. Now, let me tell you this, though, because, again, I'm not Superwoman. I was as numb as a rock on the inside. But something, again, in the courageous part of just wanting to still live and still have purpose made me still do those things. And so we have to wake up in the morning, as difficult as that may be in the times of challenge and really hard things, make our breakfast and take our shower and, go on the errands that we need to. And again, I told you I was as numb as a rock, and that was for a long time that I felt like that trauma was in my body and in my mind. But I knew that what that psychologist had said was exactly the right thing to be doing with myself and my life and my family. And so that's how we managed to do that, having the right perspective of what you do when trauma hits. There were many days that were really, really hard still, but my conscious reasoning that I talked about was always at work, and it was working for me. And so I share these things, and I know for those who may be experiencing things like losing a child or a loved one, it's hard for you to understand it. But my prayer is that you will really take some time to process it, because there are so many reasons to go on, and so many people that want you to, and even your loved one would want you to, and those are things that you need to know and understand. I did a lot of self-talk all the time to encourage myself and to strengthen myself. One thing that I did have to be very cautious about is that you are often bombarded with opinions and suggestions and things that people say in regard to what you're going through. And it's not that they're not well-meaning. They often just don't know exactly what they should be saying that might help you. But you have to be very careful, because sometimes that information that they do give you, like somebody saying, what did you do that something so awful happened to you? And, okay, that's your perspective on this. Well, I think that might be a little bit wrong. The reality is that there was a car accident and my daughter unfortunately died. That's the reality. And so we have to be careful with a lot of the spiritual things that people may want to say to you in times of crisis. And there were so many things. I mean, I really had to do a lot of avoiding people due to that fact. You need to be sure that you listen to people that are going to help you land safely and look for those people. Again, I said that I did not go see a psychologist only that one time. This is the only time in my whole life I ever have. And the reason is because I had experienced a lot of trauma even before that. I lost my mom tragically. There were several things. And so my pain that I felt emotionally was very deep. And I did not really feel that even a professional would be able to help go to those places that would help me heal to become whole again, to become feeling again, and just happy again in life. And not that they can't do their job. I just knew that for me, it was going to be a lot of challenge to get through that pain. I can remember like crying a whole river. That's how hard and painful a lot of the things that I had gone through were. So anyway, back to what I was saying. Be sure that the perspectives that you get are perspectives that are right. I say this, when you are flatlining in life, things have happened, you're flatlining, choose CPR. Choose perspectives that are right. Choose perspectives that are right. That's how you're going to get helped when you're going through things. You will learn to stand on wisdom. It helps to have the right people around you to give you support. And I do rest in the principles of the Bible. That has been where my strength has come from. My constant praise is that the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I've made it through because of that. But I want to share a funny story with you. I told you I'd been through a lot, and at one of those times when I was a lot younger, I talked to a pastor about something that I was going through. He offered me very little guidance in regard to what I had talked about, but he kept saying scriptures. And one of them, he said to me, okay, now, joy will come in the morning. He said that to me about 5 times and sent me on my way. Well, I was not quite sure at that point what that really meant, except that I know that I spent most of the night my eyes wide open with the expectation that by morning my troubles would be gone. And I know that sounds funny, but it's a true story. So when morning finally came and everything was still about the same, I was like, okay, did he mean this morning? I think he meant this morning. But here's the thing. He was well-meaning, I'm sure of that. But we have to have the right perspective even when we're dealing with Scripture. We have to have wisdom when we're dealing with Scripture. I had the wrong perspective of what that meant, and I didn't have the wisdom of what joy will come in the morning meant. But here's what I can tell you, that once I understood it, embraced it, studied it, and really got an understanding, this I can tell you, when you are going through things and it's hard, but you can rest in that scripture, because joy does ultimately come. It does. The next thing that I would like to share with you from my outline is that we have to move from our why God when things happen to relying on God. Move from why God, why in the world? Why is this happening? What, why? And you really do have to move from that why to relying on God. There are several things here that you need to know. There's a supernatural strength that comes from that. Us as believers, we know that. Anybody who's listening who may not understand that at this point, and you think it's just all a bunch of bunk and crap, I get that too, because it just sounds too good to be true. But there's a reality. I would not be standing. I would not still be standing had I not relied on the power of God to get me to where I am. There's 3 things that I want you to know at work when it comes to relying on God. Three things that you must do. One of them is pray. The second thing is pray. What do you think the third thing is? The third thing is pray. And you do this because praying brings you into an understanding of the presence of God. Praying brings you into a place of understanding the power of God. And the third thing is that praying brings you into a place of peace within God. A kind of peace that no therapy or anything else or anything anybody said or getting enough rest or, going on vacation, none of that will do what praying will do for you. And again, you have to understand what praying is. It's not asking for, cars and houses and stuff, although, it's okay to pray for that stuff. But I'm talking about a spiritual revelation for you. I'm talking about a spiritual existence. And praying really is what it turns the key. It turns the key from your why God into relying on God. And not just relying on God, but relying on God for everything, as they say. Everything. Day in, day out. That's the way you learn to live. And it may sound like that's an interesting and kind of boring and weird life, but I promise you, it is not. Try to take yourself from your why God to totally relying on God. The next thing is moving forward. I told you that I've been through a lot of things. I have. More recently, a few years ago, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with an aggressive metastatic breast cancer. Took everybody by surprise, her most, of course. She fought a very valiant fight, doing everything that she could, doctors doing everything that they could. I had everybody all over the world that I could think of praying. We were praying and praying and praying. But she didn't live. In a very short span of time, only 18 months from the time that she was diagnosed, she passed away. Now here's the hard part of this story. She was the twin to the daughter that I lost in the car accident. Isn't that something? It was mind-boggling for me. It was devastating. It took, again, the very life out of me to face this. I remember lying across my bed and talking to God and saying, this is awful. This is hard. This is deep. This is dark. This is a place where it makes me feel like I could just crawl into a hole and just stay there. But then again, something in my courageous reasoning said, but no, keep it moving. And so I found the courage to do that. And again, through the heaviest grief. I felt like I lost 20 years off my face, and just heavy grief. But each day I was reminded what the psychologist had told me. Do things the normal way, however you were living your life. And so I did just that, working and moving about and doing all those things. I had a lot of solitude time that I chose. But people may have thought that maybe something was really wrong, that I had stopped so many associations. But it was necessary for me that I chose solitude. And I don't mean to the point that I didn't go out and do things or do things with people. I love movies and I did all of that. But I didn't do a lot of socializing. Every time I saw somebody that knew what had happened and knew I had lost my twins, they just had these reactions to me that were not, again, helpful. And so I had to avoid too much interaction, except with the people who I knew were supportive and just loved me deeply for real, that would help me get through such a time. So here's what I did. I chose that solitude. Again, I stayed away. I only associated with a very few people. In my heart, I was choosing a life and living over sadness and giving up, even though it was coming about in a very slow progression. It still was my choice to live, to move on, to keep it moving. I chose to find the strength to cope. And again, you don't always know where that's going to come from. You have to search, but I'm going to tell you some of the things that I did. Every day I looked for things online that were interesting and fun and that made me laugh. You know, whenever you laugh, endorphins, pop out all over your body, and they last for a long time. I would look for things that would make me laugh. And you probably wonder, how can you laugh in the midst of all of that grief? Well, you don't have to feel guilty about that. I needed to heal. I needed to help myself. And so I chose to do those things that would bring me that element of laughter, of joy, of fun. It was never anything huge or really big, but it didn't matter. If it made me chuckle or tickled me or whatever, it was part of the healing, going into all of my thinking and being and cells in my body and all of that. My mantra and what I do suggest is that I am moving forward. I am moving forward. Slowly but surely, I'm moving forward in life. And I want you to know that if you can say that, choose to be very deliberate. You don't have to shout it, but if you want to shout it, that's okay. Be fierce about it in your thinking. You know how you have your mind made up about something? Have it in your mind. Have a made up mind. Even if, nothing really is happening outwardly yet, just be fierce in your mind. I am moving forward. I am moving forward in spite of the challenge, the difficulty, because I plan to stand. Be forceful and be determined. Be determined that somehow or another you're going to land on your feet. And the more that you say it, I promise you that you're moving forward. Eventually, you're going to grow legs that will help you do just that. You learn a lot about your own self-motivation, and I promise you, you're going to need a lot of that, again, because people don't always say the right stuff, and you're going to have to motivate yourself. I recall King David was in one of his most challenging times in life, and it wasn't looking good. They were ready to stone him to death or something like that. And the scripture says that he encouraged himself. Same thing. He strengthened himself. He motivated himself so that he can think and do the right things, respond and react to circumstances in the way that he needed to. My last point and principle is that life is full of foes. F-O-E-S. Life is full of foes. And when you get a clear understanding of this, you will face life on your spiritual toes. We have to understand that a lot of things in life, problems particularly, are perpetual. It's not necessarily because you're doing so much wrong, but issues and problems and things just are arising around us all the time. Sometimes they're simple and sometimes they are severe. It's the nature of what we're living through. It's not just somebody. All of us are having some very similar types of issues and challenges in life. Nobody is free from that. And standing when life is crazy or in a crisis or in critical condition is not easy. And outwitting what has seemingly outwitted us, that becomes the challenge. We get knocked off our feet. We lose our footing. We collapse under life's weights and burdens. I'm reminded of 9/11 and those beautiful towers and how they stood so regal and strong and just defiant in their presence. And all it took was an evil strategy to cause such a great collapse. And great was that collapse. So a lot of us don't want to think about the evil that is often behind things that happen to us. It's only one of the elements, but it's real. These shootings and these individuals who are the perpetrators, there is evil behind that. It doesn't help anything to know that, other than, again, when we understand that that is a reality, it does help us to stay on our spiritual toes. I would want people to know, don't be mad at God about any of these things that have happened, regardless of how horrible they are. He is not responsible. There is an element of evil. The Bible teaches us that the devil prowls the earth like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour. And many of us understand that that's a truth. We don't live in a state of fear because of that. But again, it helps us stay on our spiritual toes, so when things do happen, we may be traumatized for a moment or stuck for a moment or whatever, but not forever. In that moment, we understand that there's this principle and there's this other principle that we can live by, where we can outwit what has seemingly tried to outwit us. I want to read you just a short something that Napoleon Hill, he's the guy that wrote Think and Grow Rich. He also wrote Outwitting the Devil. And this is just a one-liner, two-liners maybe. But he said, the person who moves with definiteness recognizes the difference between temporary defeat and failure. When plans fail, and I'm going to say when life collapses, he substitutes others, but he does not change his purpose. He perseveres. And that's what I think I'd like to leave you with today. We outwit the worst of things when we persevere, when we dare through the principles that I've shared with you today, dare to keep standing. I've done it through all the many trials, the tragedies, the hardships, and I know that you can too. Now, this message was not meant to create any sadness by any means, but sometimes it just helps to hear some of the story. Some stories that they came out, triumphantly, courageously, okay. I think it helps that when you know that there are individuals, and there's gazillions of us, of course, who have managed to make it through difficult and trying times. Things that we may have not even realized we had the ability to persevere, but we did. We got back up on our feet, and we got back to life again. And that's my hope and prayer for you today. I want to thank you for taking the time, spending this time with me. And as I said, this is a course. There's going to be more to come where we actually work on some of the things that people go through and how you literally process going through some of how you navigate going through things. So watch for me again next month. I'll be back and we'll still be talking about issues of faith. If you would like some additional inspiration, you can go to my webpage at silverrayfox.com. There are tons of articles there that I've written intentionally to motivate, empower, and inspire you. And there's also a link there for my books. You will see it says Silver Ray Fox Books. There's a link. And you can buy What is Faith in my newest book, Stay in the Ring. So take a look around there if you find that you have the time. Again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And I'm going to look forward to talking to you again next time.